Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Sean Huggins and this is Europe with Hugs. Thank you so much for being here. I am an American looking to learn more about life in Europe through watching silly videos and stuff on the internet with you guys. So today we have this crazy video plan. Look at this. Should France share their nukes? My God. France's nuclear umbrella, should it be extended across the EU? I don't know. Jesus, this is crazy. All right, link to the original video down in the description as always. And if you enjoy, consider subscribing. It helps the algorithm, which helps the channel, and it's very much appreciated. But let's waste no more time. Let's get into it.
This video is sponsored by ExpressVPN. Imagine a dark, chilling moment in modern history. Just across the border in Estonia, a NATO country, a tactical nuclear bomb detonates. Thousands of lives are lost instantly, and the scale of devastation is unthinkable. But here's the big question. What happens next? Will NATO nuclear powers like the United States retaliate? Are they really willing to risk the safety of cities like New York,
probably not.
San Francisco, or Washington, D.C. for a small country on Russia's doorstep? Many don't think so, especially now with Donald Trump back in the White House. Trump has voiced skepticism about the EU and NATO time and time again, even encouraging Russia to invade EU members who aren't contributing at least 2% of GDP to defense. With this uncertainty in mind, it raises a whole new question. What if Europe had its own nuclear shield? In this video, we're going to dive into what a European nuclear deterrent might look like, who would control it, and what it means for global security.
All right.
First, let's clarify what a nuclear umbrella actually means. In its simplest terms, it's a commitment by one nation to use its nuclear arsenal to defend an ally. Using our earlier example, if Russia were to launch a nuclear attack on Estonia, NATO, including the United States, would be obligated to defend Estonia. And in the event of a nuclear strike, that defense would likely mean retaliating with nuclear weapons of its own. Currently, three NATO countries maintain nuclear arsenals: the United States, the United Kingdom, and France.
Bro, the United States has 5,000? Jesus!
Since Brexit, France stands as the only EU nation with nuclear capabilities. And in a way, its nuclear arsenal provides the EU with a form of deterrence. But here's the catch. The France nuclear force is fundamentally national. It exists solely for France's own security. But did you know there's also an EU defense clause? It states that if a member state is the victim of armed aggression on its territory, the other members shall have towards it an obligation of aid and assistance by all the means in their power. Interestingly, if we compare it to NATO's defense clause, which says an armed attack against one or more NATO members shall be considered an attack against them all, the EU's version is actually stronger.
This is true. EU's version is stronger. Interesting.
The EU's clause specifies aid by all means in their power, making the commitment clear. Meanwhile, the NATO clause requires a response, but the type of response is left up to each country.
Yeah, the NATO one is very not specific, so it could mean anything or
In
nothing.
Theory, that means the US could meet its NATO obligation by sending medical packs and helmets rather than troops or military aid. So does this mean France, as an EU member, would come to the rescue if Russia attacked Estonia? The reality is unclear. There's no formal treaty in Europe mandating nuclear retaliation, so it's doubtful that a nuclear attack on Estonia would provoke the same response as one on France itself. This ambiguity could deepen from 2027 onward, especially if an isolationist candidate like Marine Le Pen or Jean-Luc Mélenchon wins the French presidency. Both are openly skeptical of the EU and are unlikely to prioritize defending other EU or NATO countries in a crisis. Le Pen has even voiced a French nukes for France stance, suggesting that France's nuclear arsenal would serve solely French interests.
Dude, this picture of her is crazy. She looks like a freaking crazy person.
France stance, suggesting that France's nuclear arsenal would serve solely French interests. Given Putin's unpredictability, like his decision to invade Ukraine, it's hard to rule out future aggressive actions against the Baltic states. To prepare for such threats, leaders like Macron and others in the EU may begin exploring ways to future-proof European defense, potentially through the creation of a European nuclear umbrella. And we see three possible models of how this umbrella could take shape. First, there's the French-led umbrella, where Paris retains sole control over the launch decision, much like the US does within NATO. This setup is the most likely, as it would require the least political push and be the least costly. Plus, it's a model that's been tried and tested. Throughout the Cold War, and even today, America's nuclear shield over Europe has helped deter major conflict. France could even explore cooperation with the UK, whose nuclear interests likely align with France's, to strengthen this arrangement. Alternatively, though, there could be a shared model where France maintains nuclear assets but gives select EU nations, like Poland or Germany, a say in deployment and decisions. Currently, French nuclear weapons are deployed through two main platforms: nuclear submarines and air assets, like the Rafale aircraft. France no longer has land-based missile silos, which were disbanded in 1996 as part of a strategic shift to modernize and streamline its nuclear forces. All French nuclear assets are currently stationed within France, but relocating some to Germany or Poland could shorten response times in the event of foreign aggression. Spreading out these assets might also make it harder for foreign countries to conduct a successful strike against the EU. Plus, under this model, the high cost of maintaining and deploying nuclear weapons could be shared among participating EU nations, easing the financial burden on France alone. A third, and probably the most ambitious model, envisions a new EU defense body jointly managing nuclear decisions, integrating...
Well, I don't even need to hear the whole story behind this. I think that this is definitely not going to happen.
Collective European interests into one common command structure. This solution is far more complex, as it would mean France giving up some autonomy over its nuclear launch decisions. Realistically, it's challenging, but it could be a viable model for a more federated European Union in the future. In this scenario, a cabinet, perhaps including the EU Commission President, would jointly decide on nuclear weapon use. In this scenario, funding for the nuclear deterrent would come from multiple EU nations, and decisions on its use would be made together. Supporters of an EU nuclear deterrent highlight several potential benefits. First, it would provide a strong deterrent against aggression, making it clear to adversaries that any attack on Europe would have severe consequences. Second, it would enhance Europe's strategic autonomy, reducing reliance on the US and allowing Europe to make independent security decisions. And finally, a collective nuclear deterrent would enable cost sharing among EU nations, reducing the financial burden on individual countries like France.
Yeah, the cost efficiency and the other stuff too would be nice, but I think that the bureaucracy and the time that it takes for the EU to make decisions on things, that's not what you want in a situation like this, I feel like.
While there are many benefits, there are also significant drawbacks. First, increased risk of escalation. A European nuclear deterrent could heighten tensions with adversaries, potentially sparking arms races and making Europe a primary target in global conflicts.
Not to mention, one country might have beef with another country that the whole of EU doesn't care about. You know, like one country could just not like its neighbor and be like, hey, now I got this nuke, what's up? And the rest of the EU is like, yo, everyone relax. Why? This is stupid, you know? But if everything's spread out through the whole EU, you never know.
Second, loss of sovereignty for France. In shared decision-making models, France would need to relinquish some control over its nuclear arsenal, challenging its long-held independence and possibly leading to internal resistance. And finally, alliance dynamics. France extending its nuclear reach over Europe could disrupt NATO's structure, potentially straining relations with the US. The US has vested interest in maintaining its nuclear umbrella over Europe, both as a source of influence and to bolster defense sales in EU countries. Proponents of EU autonomy may not see this as a concern, but it could strain the transatlantic alliance. So, what would it take to make a French nuclear umbrella a reality? Well, political will across the EU would be essential. France would need to take the lead, but buy-in from key countries like Germany, Poland, and Italy would be crucial. This would likely require pro-EU governments in each of these countries, along with a major event, such as a US withdrawal from NATO, to galvanize support.
Well,
it might also
that is not out of the realm of possibility.
Require eliminating the notorious EU veto, which could allow any single nation, like Hungary, under pro-Russian leadership, to block progress entirely.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy how this guy is just steamrolling the EU. Like,
Clearly.
crazy.
Next, technical and operational challenges would need to be tackled.
Whoa,
Integrating
what is
nuclear
this?
command systems across nations and establishing reliable security protocols would be critical for such an umbrella to function properly. And finally, public opinion cannot be ignored. Nuclear weapons are deeply divisive, and any major shift towards a European nuclear policy would need significant public backing, something that varies widely across EU countries. In the end, the likelihood of a French nuclear umbrella in the near future is slim. But what do you think? Should Europe pursue any of these three models? Or is nuclear deterrence better left to existing NATO structures? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.
Yeah, I think that they should just keep it how it is, keep the system how it is. France keeps their weapons and they just, they keep their promise of protecting, the umbrella of the EU. And I think that that's good enough. I think that that would cause the least amount of bureaucracy and problems. And yeah, I think that that's fine. But I don't know. I'm just some guy on the internet. So I'm curious what you guys have to say about it. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments section below. And again, if you enjoyed, consider subscribing. We're trying to hit that magical 1,000 subscriber mark, so it'd be greatly appreciated. But that being said, that's all the time that I have for today. So thank you guys so much for being here. And as always, I'll see you guys next time. Peace.